Welcome to Oracle Application Express, Apex Regions, Shared Components, Part 2. Build Options gives developers an incredible amount of flexibility in determining what parts of their Oracle application they want to move into production. You can define different build options as part of the shared components for your application. The build options are pretty straightforward. You simply name the build options and then define whether you want to include or exclude a particular piece of code. So I can create a build option called exclude this and give it a status of exclude. Once this is defined, I can go into my individual components that make up my application and assign the build option for this particular component. Once I've assigned a build option, when it comes time for me to export the application, the logic will be used here to either include the component or exclude the component. If I go back to the movie entry page that I was working with a little while ago, I have this time display region. I can edit that and change the build option to exclude this. I also have the option of selecting the negative of whatever I've defined. So I can say not exclude this, which is basically including it as part of my migration from test or development into production. I can define a whole bunch of different build options and assign them to the various components that make up my application. Once I do that, it will automatically either be included or excluded from the build when I go from my test dev environment to my production environment. If you remember, when we created a page earlier, one of the page types that we can define was one called data loading. I went through a quick example and I created a quick data loading piece called XYZ. That data loading piece shows up in my shared components. So all of the rules that I set up to perform a data load from an Excel spreadsheet into my Oracle database that were part of the pages also gets defined here. I can reuse all of the rules that I've created over and over again inside my application if I need to. I can either define these data loads inside of the Create Page wizard, or I can come here to Shared Components and walk through a very similar wizard that defines all of the rules for my data load here. In this lesson, we're not going to talk about tabs. There's a lesson coming up where we'll discuss tabs in depth. Lists are exactly what they sound like. They're lists that you can put on your page anywhere inside your application. A list is very similar to a list of values. You can either build a list based on static values or build them based on dynamic values that you get out of the database. Static values require that I enter all of the values that are going to show up in this list. Dynamic allows me to define a SQL statement so that I can populate the list. Lists are real good for things like news stories, where maybe you want to query the latest 5 or 6 stories out of a database table and display them on the screen for users to read. In general, they're not used as things that are going to drive data that you put inside of your database the way a list of values are. A list of values also has greater flexibility in how that information is displayed. It could be displayed in a drop-down box. It could be displayed as a radio group. There's a lot of different interface elements that we can use with lists of values. A list is designed much more as a simple way of displaying information in a list on a page. Breadcrumbs are similar to the breadcrumb menu you see here on the top left of the page. Inside of Application Builder, I'm inside of Application 101, and inside of Application 101, I'm in the Shared Components. Breadcrumbs allow you to have the same functionality inside of your application. This can make it much easier for users to navigate around your application. Navigation bar entries are those things that you see in the top right of your application when you're actually running it. So let me run a page from my application. And you can see that I have 3 navigation bar entries along the top of the screen. Who I'm logged in as, the feedback link, and a logout link. I can create other entries in my navigation bar here if I so desire. The other types of shared components that we can use deal with globalization and reports. Globalization allows you to define the different characteristics for different languages for your application. If your application is going to be used globally by users who speak different languages, the globalization parameters allow you to quickly define the types of messages in different language and give users the ability to change the language that they see inside of the application. Earlier, we discussed some of the report server options that were available to us inside of Oracle Application Express. I can define basic report queries and report layouts to use those different report servers that I've defined inside of my Oracle Application Express environment. It's a little beyond the scope of what we're trying to accomplish in these introductory lessons. You can get more information about reporting and globalization in the Oracle documentation.